What's up guys, it's Flossin. Today, I wanted to talk about something that's been on the community's mind recently, the new Shiyu Defense cycle. Now, I've seen a lot of buzz about how the difficulty is ramped up, especially when it comes to floor 5. If you're like me, you might have hit a wall trying to clear those stages, and honestly, I get it. Now, I'll be real with you guys, even though I'm knee deep into calculus 2, when it comes to gaming, I don't always use my brain. I'm not here to hit you with charts, numbers, or even advanced calculations. Instead, I want to share my personal experience and observations of what's happening and what Hoyoverse might be telling us with this difficulty spike. If this video ends up helping you out, don't forget to drop a like down below. It's completely free and lets me know that you enjoy this type of content. Now, with formalities out of the way, let's talk games. First things first, for those unfamiliar or just jumping into Zenless Zone Zero, let me give a quick breakdown of Shiyu Defense. It's one of the more in-game focused modes where you really get to test whether your characters and gear are up to snuff. It's a great place to see how viable your builds really are, but it's also a mode where mistakes are punished more than usual. In its current form, there are 4 nodes available in Shiyu Defense. 2 are permanent, meaning you can claim these rewards just once, and the other 2 are time limited, resetting after a certain period. Of these game modes, one of the modes is a battle of attrition, where you're incentivized to not have any of your agents die. The other one is more of a race against the time, testing how quickly you can defeat enemies before it runs out. So, with general stuff out of the way, let's move on to the real meat of this video. How the difficulty of Shiyu Defense has escalated, especially in the last 3 stages, with floor 5 being the real elephant in the room. This time around, floor 5 has introduced something new that's really thrown a lot of people off. Doppelgangers. These aren't just your average enemies, they're copies, makeshift versions of characters we've either seen before or will likely see as future playable agents. I mean, if Pulchra isn't a playable character, then why did they give her such a ginormous These doppelgangers are bringing new attack strings and mechanics, making the fights even more interactive than we've seen in the past. And I think that's a key change. Remember the last Shiyu Defense where we were mainly fighting Jane Doe? Well, now it's like we're getting a whole new tier of difficulty, and that's what really made this new defense mode stand out. If you haven't had the chance to face off against Jane Doe's doppelganger in the HDD system, let me remind you, that fight was no joke. There's a side mission where you go up against her in a brutally difficult battle, giving us a hint at what these doppelgangers can really do. So, why is this happening? What's with the sudden increase of difficulty on the top floors? Sure, adding new enemies is something we can expect from any game update. New challenges keep the content fresh and engaging, and it's always exciting to see how Hoyoverse pushes to adapt. But why are these floors much harder than before? Why is it that, even with solid builds, players are feeling the pressure now more than previous updates? The obvious and go-to answer is power scaling. As more agents are released, it makes sense that enemies would scale up to match our increased damage output and survivability, ensuring that the game still remains a challenge. After all, if the enemies didn't keep up, we'd be breezing through everything in the future, and that's not fun for anybody. But in my opinion, that's only part of the picture. There's something deeper going on. This isn't just about numbers going up. What I think we're seeing here is a deliberate shift in the design philosophy behind these challenges. Hoyoverse is known for crafting content that evolves alongside the player base, and this increase in difficulty feels like a signal that we're entering a new phase of endgame. Over time, I don't think it'll be about hitting harder or enemies being damage sponges. I think they're starting to layer new mechanics in the game, and eventually, enemy behaviors will demand more from us as players, encouraging us to rethink our strategies. Let's take a step back and look at Star Rail for a minute. I know some of you might not play it, but the parallels between Zenless and Star Rail are worth noting when it comes to talking about in-game modes. Back when Star Rail first launched, the in-game content was essentially a level and gear check. If you didn't have the right levels or well-built characters, clearing all 12 floors of its in-game was borderline impossible. But as players got more characters and resources, we started breezing through those floors. That is, until things changed. Several months into Star Rail's lifecycle, the difficulty on certain floors spiked, especially on floor 10. Suddenly, it wasn't just about power, it was about mechanics. Enemies started to get tougher, with new mechanics that required specific counters, forcing players to rethink strategies. We started seeing enemies with more resistances, and bigger toughness bars on enemies that could only be dealt with by specific characters. It was a way for the devs to make sure that players couldn't simply snowball through the content as their power levels grew. This is what I think we're seeing in Zenless with the new Shiyu Defense. The devs are starting to introduce mechanics and enemies that will make older characters and their strategies less effective. Over time, this power scaling is going to favor newer agents, while the 1.0 generation of characters will start to feel less viable. It's a natural progression in these type of games. But before you rush to the comments and tell me how Billy can solo every piece of content in 30 seconds, hear me out. Just because a character can brute force through content now, doesn't mean they'll be able to in the future. Let me bring up a classic example from Genshin Impact, Ganyu. When Ganyu first came out in Genshin, she was an absolute beast. You could obliterate enemies without breaking a sweat, and for a while, the devs tried to counter her by simply increasing the health pool of enemies. But then came Magukenki, a new enemy that directly countered Ganyu's playstyle. With its resistance to ranged attacks and shielding mechanics, it forced Ganyu players to adapt or switch characters entirely. I believe that something similar could happen with these new doppelgangers that are being added to Zenless. In the future, I'm sure we're going to see more and more mechanics that counter specific DPS strategies, forcing us to diversify our teams and really rethink how we approach these challenges. Right now, we're only scratching the surface of what devs can do with combat in Zenless. We've seen fast enemies, slow enemies, ranged enemies, and more. But I really believe that future updates will challenge us in new ways. It won't just be about matching DPS to the enemy weakness anymore. We may even have to think about positioning, timing, or all 3 disk drive sets that we run in our teams. I know this sounds repetitive, but I'm still gonna farm it for engagement. Pulling characters is totally fine. There's no right way of playing this game. But at the same time, I do believe you have to be prepared for the reality that certain characters won't always be optimal for the endgame content that Shiyu throws at us. Of course, again, this doesn't directly apply now, but I believe it will in the future. For now though, we have some breathing room. But I promise I won't be surprised if an enemy with an ice weakness shows up that Ellen Joe struggles with, while Miyabi completely destroys, even though they both share the same element. But I think that's enough yapping out of me. I'm curious though, what do you guys think? Do you feel the difficulty spike in Shiyu Defense? And do you think we'll see characters get countered in the future like Ganyu? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you did enjoy this video, don't forget to drop a like down below. It's completely free and lets me know that you enjoy this type of content. Until next time though, happy gaming and may your pulls be ever in your favor.